part 2 of the 25th annual Collingwood Elvis Festival. Hello everyone and welcome to Beach Talk on Wasaga Beach TV. I'm Dianna Chycki. Today on the show we will feature my exclusive interviews from Elvis's co-stars Cynthia Pepper from Kissing Cousin, Marlyn Mason from The Trouble with Girls, Elvis's security and personal friend Sam Thompson, and Festivals coordinator Rosemarie O'Brien. Joining me is Elvis' kissing cousin, Cynthia Pepper. Welcome back to the Collingwood Elvis Festival. Such a pleasure to meet you.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So I understand you have attended this Elvis Festival several years, along with meeting Priscilla Presley 5 years ago. How was the experience of meeting Priscilla?
Well, I had met her years ago after I did Kissing Cousins, and Lisa Marie was about 2 or 3, and my son was a couple years older, and we lived in West Hollywood, and we went to a park. And I had told her about that, see if she remembered, years ago. And she says, I think I did. And I don't know if she was just being polite. So the kids played together.
Aww.
And then my son says, why didn't you keep in touch?
Aww.
and then I saw her a couple of times in Vegas, where I live. And that's it. But I mean, we just hug. She doesn't know me, and I don't know her that well. But it was wonderful. She's so sweet and gracious.
That's wonderful. So you have an incredible family life. Your mother was a Ziegfeld Follies, and your father was a singer who married Ginger Rogers. So how was your life growing up in a showbiz environment?
It was all show business. I did a Broadway show when I was 4 with Julie Harris, and I was the youngest, and she was the oldest, and it was her Broadway debut. And then I was 4, and then I just, took lessons and went to regular school. I went to Hollywood High, and in Hollywood, where I was born. And I just studied, and that's all I ever wanted to do. My dad married 3 times, first to Ginger, when she was 17 and he was 22. She was a Charleston champion dancer in Texas.
Wow.
And then he married my mother, and then had my sister and myself. My mother gave it up from the kids. Stay disciplined,
Of course. So what age did you decide you wanted to pursue an acting career? Always? This was something
else.
from the get-go?
It's in the blood.
Okay.
Because my dad was in vaudeville, and he had a partner named Salt.
Okay.
Real name is Culpepper, but he shopped at Cull, and so do I. So it was Salt and Pepper, and then he married Ginger Rogers. Isn't that strange? The spice. And but I met her years ago at 20th Century Fox in the wardrobe department, and I said, I've got to say something to her. This is my chance. It's really silly. So I went up to her and I said, Miss Rogers, and she says, yes. I said, my name is Cynthia Pepper. I believe you know my father. Well, of course she knew him. She was married to him. She gave me a big hug, and I'll never forget. She says, well, how is the dear boy? And I said, he's fine. And we had lunch a couple times in the commissary, and she was very gracious. So it's all show business, really. I mean, I don't think I've ever done anything else, really.
There's only one life, showbiz.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
People over the house playing piano. My mom's dancing in the kitchen. It was wonderful.
Oh, wow. So you wrote a book titled Pigtails, Presley, and Pepper. What prompted you to write this book? Because I understand it's a memoir.
Because it is, and it's a show business book. Of course, Elvis is in a big chapter, and he's through my whole life. I dedicated to my mom and dad who gave me life. Let's see, my mother and dad who gave me life, to my son who is my light, and my husband who's the love of my life, and to Elvis who's still in my life. And it's true. And people would say, well, the show business thing, James Dean talking to me, and just stuff. And I said, well, you're all right. So my friend Victor Hansen, he's Canadian, my dear friend.
Nice.
We wrote it together, and I would start from the beginning, and we'd hone it together. And it's a show business book, and I hope it's interesting about the good and the bad, not too ugly. With the drinking, some problems with that and things. Not me, but family. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad I did it. If not for anything, for a legacy to my son. I have a son, so.
Nice. And I hear you also mentioned the Collingwood Elvis Festival and Rosemarie O'Brien in your book.
Oh, yes.
How nice.
Absolutely.
How nice.
I love Canadians, actually.
Aww.
I'm here so often I had to get a job. I want to get a job
okay, we're going to hire you.
Oh, you're going to
hire you.
I'll be a gopher. I'll be an intern. How's that?
That's great. So you were featured in My 3 Sons, Lassie, Margie, the Flying Nun, the Addams Family. So to name a few, and of course, Kissing Cousins with Elvis. How did you enjoy co-starring with Elvis?
Well, should I tell you how I got it? Most people have to audition. Well, usually you do, and I did too. My agent called me on a Friday and said, Cynthia, sit down. And I went, okay. I sat down, and he said, well, Elvis Presley saw you on something. I don't know what, because he watched a lot of TV. And I said, okay. And he said that you, whoever that woman is, young girl, is, she might be right for this part of Midge Riley in this movie we're doing. And so they said, you go to MGM Studios. We lived in West Hollywood at the time. And if you go to wardrobe, and if you can fit into the uniform, you're co-starring with Elvis on Monday. And I grew up, like I said, in Hollywood in the 50s, 40s and 50s. And I was like, oh, Elvis Presley. And here, a few years later, I was co-starring with him and becoming a friend, you know. It was amazing. I thought I would be very intimidated, but he made you feel so comfortable.
Well, that's great to know,
Yeah.
in a way. So, I hear you got to kiss Elvis and enjoyed it so much that you kept
Messing it up.
Okay, tell
But
us.
it's true.
Tell
It's
us all
true.
about that.
Well, what happens is I flip him a couple of times, and then he grabs me to the floor, and we rehearse. You know, I used a little bit, as much as possible from my part, and then we started shooting. And I would say, he'd say, "Let's mess it up." So the light. I said, "Excuse me," Gene Nelson directed, who I had a crush on. Just from afar. I said, Gene, the light. And we kept doing it about 12 times.
Oh my gosh.
Just to do it. What woman wouldn't, right?
Oh my
I mean, it
gosh.
was wonderful, and he smelled like Brute.
Oh wow.
The cologne, and he was just, it was a sweet kiss, wonderful, just a wonderful human being, but a quite insecure human being.
That's interesting.
Yes, we all knew him, but in a different way. And the thread is what a wonderful man he was, person. But he said to me one time, before he sang to me, we were in Big Bear, California, and we were outside, and we had to stop, and we were talking, many conversations, and he said, Cynthia, and I said, what, Elvis? He said, I don't know what I'm doing here making these films. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I think I should be back driving a truck. And I went, wow, it gave me chills. What do you say to that? I'm a country boy. That's where I belong. That's what I felt.
That's
He
interesting.
knew who he was, obviously. A lot of actors are shy. They get on stage, they're it. But he was very humble and very, but the fans remember me when I'm gone. He asked that of a number of people. I went, of course, Elvis. Well, I didn't know. Many years later that they do, and they love him dearly. And he would be very, very honored to know. He loved his fans.
Oh, how
Yeah, that was
wonderful.
his thing.
Yeah. Now I hear since you got this movie with Elvis,
Yes.
lots of your friends showed up.
Oh, yeah.
Showed up. You got all these girlfriends.
Yeah, I had more friends than it's like if you won the lottery, oh, my, Uncle Joe or whatever, Sister Sue. Yeah, I had a lot of girlfriends because they grew up in that era, Oh, I said, who's at the gate? Oh, okay, and they came in and they, I was very popular for a while. I still know my high school
you still
friends.
are. I mean, you've done so much.
Yeah, well, but I was always just one of them. That's what he was. It was not just a job, but I didn't think I was any better than anyone else because I was doing this. You know what I'm saying? I have a lesson to learn. When I was 4 years old, I was doing the Broadway show. I said to my sister, who's 4 years older, she had to go to school. And I said, I don't have to go to school. I'm going to the theater. My mother said, she took me over and spanked me with the hairbrush. You could do that in those, the soft end.
Yes.
And she said, don't ever think that way. You're not worse or better than anyone else. And I went, ooh, and that stuck with me. Mm-hmm. And every job is important. And we need other people to work. So
Absolutely. So, how was your relationship with Elvis? I'm not talking romantically, but what
That's
kind of
good, 'cause-
relationship did you have?
it was very sweet, very protective. I felt on my side, very protective. We had the producer would come in and make a joke in front of everybody, and I wasn't naive. I was a grown woman. I was young, and he would say, Cynthia, why didn't you wake me up when you got out of bed? And I went, which is completely untrue. And I went, I was so embarrassed. And extras, everybody's waiting on Elvis. He did that about 2 or 3 days.
Oh, gosh.
And I was almost to tears. And finally, I was like, cut that out of there. Don't you ever do that again. It never happened again. Just very protective. And he helped me find a cat, too.
Aw.
I'm a big animal lover. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, how has your career changed since making this movie with Elvis?
Well, I still worked after that. It really, till I got into the Elvis family, Elvis world, I was just a working actress. And then it changed personally because of people I met and so forth. And I enjoy what I'm doing now, traveling and talking to fans. And I always tell people, you got to get us while you can because we're not going to be here forever, Who knew Elvis?
That's wonderful. So, knowing what you know about Elvis, how do you think he would react with all these Elvis and tribute artists?
Gee, I don't know. I think Well, in my mind, I think he would be looking down and saying, "What's all the fuss? I was just a singer. What's the big deal?" That's what he was, humble.
Very humble.
Humble, but he knew who he was. We got on stage. He was Elvis. But he was humble because he came from humble, beginnings, as we know.
Well, thank you, Cynthia, for being my guest.
Thank you.
And for sharing your stories.
Thank
Wishing
you.
you a wonderful weekend at the 25th anniversary of the Collingwood Elvis Festival.
Thank you so much.
You.
And thank you to the fans, and keep loving him.
Thank you
honey.
so much. Oh, bless you.
Thank you.
Joining me is Elvis co-star in the movie The Trouble with Girls, the very vibrant and lovely Marlyn Mason. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So welcome back to the Collingwood Elvis Festival in celebration of the silver anniversary. I understand you were here 5 years ago.
I think it was 6.
Oh,
but
6?
Yes,
Okay.
I think it was 6 years ago. That's what Sean Clush told me. It was 6 years
Oh,
ago.
he reminded you, of
yes.
course, and I interviewed him yesterday, so
Yeah.
of course. So you're an actor, producer, and screenwriter, and have been featured in many movies and TV series such as My Three Sons, Hogan's Heroes, Marcus Welby, The Fugitive, Mission Impossible, to name a few. And of course, The Trouble with Girls with Elvis. What an incredible career. In the film Trouble with Girls, you were the trouble girl. Can you elaborate about your role?
Yes, I drove Elvis crazy, and he drove me crazy. Seriously, I didn't know. I had never seen an Elvis movie. I was not an Elvis fan, so I didn't know what I was getting into, and I thought I wasn't going to like him. I thought he was going to be a pain in the keister. And the moment we met, I said, "Oh my God, I love this guy. He's going to be wonderful to work with." And so, in the story, he's management, I'm labor. So we're like this all the time. But it hints in the story that we'd had a little something going on before, like a prequel to the movie. And he just irritates me all the time because I think he takes advantage of people, and I don't think he does anything right. He's stupid, and underneath it all, I mean, I don't know what was going on in Elvis's mind, but looking at it, he likes me, and he likes that challenge. So he slowly kind of reels me in, but I'm always unhooking myself, and he can't get me. And it goes right through to the end of the movie. I'm trying to get away from him, and he's hanging on to me. And Peter McNichol, an actor, he had seen all of Elvis's movie, and when I loaned him the movie, he told me, when he handed it back to me, he said, "This is different from all of Elvis's other movies. Everything about it is different." And I had no idea because I hadn't seen an Elvis movie. And but basically, to answer your question, it was this kind of push-pull relationship that you want him to probably just, well, I don't want to say slap her because we don't do that, but, kind of give her a kick. And because she's feisty and at him all the time. But that was the crux of the relationship.
So tell us about the zipper story in the scene of this film.
I have to act that out. I don't have my props. I need props. The zipper story, it'll probably lose some of its charm as I tell it here, because I do a whole acting thing with it. Peter Tewksbury, it was a close-up. It's in the scene where he kisses me. When the rocket goes through the tent, brings us together and we kiss. Well, prior to that, he's working me. And I'm sitting in a chair, and we had done the master shot where he's rubbing my shoulders. So now we come in, we do my close-up, and he's rubbing my shoulders, and we do the scene. Now it's his close-up. So imagine Elvis behind me, and he's rubbing my shoulders, and it's not my close-up, his close-up. The camera doesn't see me, I'm totally out of view. And we're doing the dialogue, and Peter Tewksbury came to me before, and he said, he wanted a particular look from Elvis. And I can't remember what he said, but he said, "I don't care what you do," which I love that, I don't care what you do, get me this look. So I had no idea what I was going to do. So I'm sitting in this chair. So now I turn around. Camera's on Elvis. He's here. I turn around, and I'm looking at his zipper. And he's talking. I'm talking, and I go, what else can I do? So I just start fiddling with the belt, talking, and I have no idea what Elvis is doing, but he's not stopping. So I just hang in there and I get that little zipper thing and I start unzipping. And I'm unzipping and I'm thinking, come on, Tewksbury, yelp cut, come on, let's go. And I'm going really slow and I think, oh, maybe, no, I don't. I don't take a peek. And I keep going. And finally I get right to the bottom and he says, cut, print, perfect. Elvis just burst out laughing. The beauty of Elvis, and one of the reasons I love telling the story was he stayed right in the scene, and whatever I was doing, there's a brief second where he gets this little quirky look on his face, and you wouldn't notice it. But if you're looking for it, you see it, and it's so fast, but it's like, okay. And he just keeps right on going, doesn't let it throw him at all. And it's wonderful in the scene. But that's the zipper story. That's the closest I'll ever get to Elvis.
Now, having said that, how did you get this opportunity to work with Elvis?
Peter Tewksbury.
Okay.
I was doing a Broadway musical, and 2 months after it closed, I came back to Hollywood, and about a couple of weeks later I got a call. Was I interested in doing an Elvis movie, and do I get to sing? Yes, I want to do it because I love to sing. I don't sing anymore. And so that's how I basically got it. It's possible, and I've not done my research. Peter could have directed me in an old Father Knows Best or My Three Sons, but I don't recall, and I think within the business I was rather well known. I had an established career and was known as one of the episodic queens of television. Which is kind of nice. And that's how I got the role. But somebody didn't want me.
Oh.
And I found this out years and years later from one of the boys. There were 4 college boys in the movie. And one of the boys, Charles Briles, was real good friends with Tewksbury. And Charles led me to believe that the Colonel didn't want me. And then years later, we talked about it. He said, I'm not sure it was a Colonel. He said it could have been the producer. He didn't think it was Elvis. But somebody did not want me. And Peter Tewksbury, bless his dear heart, said, if you don't use Marlyn, I walk.
Oh.
And he'd already done 2 films with Elvis, so it was nice. It's a nice story for me.
Oh, of course. Were you ever infatuated with Elvis?
Oh, everybody, men, women, dogs, cats, birds, you couldn't help it. And Elvis and I had a very affectionate relationship, but it wasn't something we hid. We were more like little kids. We were very touchy. He'd sit on my lap, I'd sit on his lap. We'd exchange hats and things and whatever we were always pulling pranks. I think Tewksbury wanted to kill us half the time, but we had a great time.
So I understand you were one of the 3 leading ladies to record with Elvis, because you talk how you enjoyed singing along with Anne Margaret and Nancy Sinatra.
Yes, good company. I'm in great company. Terrible song, but it's fun. It's a long sequence in the movie, and it was fun to record with him. Mac Davis was at the recording because he wrote a song in the movie called "Clean Up Your Own Backyard," and it was nice having him there. It was, he's like Elvis. The 3 of us we loved to sing and perform.
Nice. So how has your life changed since co-starring with Elvis in Trouble with Girls?
I'm almost 80. My career did come to a halt in '93, and I thought, and my agent died and my car died. So in Hollywood, I thought, dead car, dead agent, dead career. And I had a girlfriend that I had grown up since we were 5 years old. We were like sisters, and she had moved to Oregon, and her boyfriend had built a little guest house for her sister, for her parents. And when they died, she said to me, if you ever want to leave Hollywood or you need a roof over your head, she said, you always have a home here.
Aww.
So in '93, when I thought I was done, because I was 53, there wasn't a lot of work for women my age. I had a couple of agents from the past that I went to. They were not interested because they couldn't get work for the ladies that they already had. So I thought, Marlyn, your career's done. call it quits. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be poor, I want to be poor where it's pretty. So I called Jeanette and I said, is your guest house empty? She said, it will be July 18th. Why? I said, I'm coming up. And that was 1993. Now, if this all had not happened to me, I would not be here right now, because I started making short films, and and because I made a short film, a volunteer at the Rhode Island International Film Festival, who was a big Elvis fan, said, you need to call EPE. They need you in their shows. They need new blood, and you got so many stories. And I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, you call them. Her name was Amy Beth Paravano. She changed my life. Aww. She called EPE and they called me. And here I am. I've been doing, so that's the big change.
So we're very lucky to hear all these stories from you.
Oh, I've got a million of them.
Oh
yeah.
My gosh, I know.
And I'm trying to talk real fast so I can get it all in.
There's so much to talk about. We're
Yes.
such a limited amount of time. So if you had an opportunity to speak with him, what would you like to tell Elvis?
I miss you.
Oh. Did you ever stay in touch with him after?
No, never saw him again. I talked to Charlie Hodge twice. Once not too long after. And I think a couple of years, year and a half before Charlie died, I tracked him down because I was just curious about him, because he loved Elvis. I think of everybody, he was the closest, the most loyal, the most attentive to him. And and I miss Charlie too.
Aw. Well, thank you, Marlyn, for sharing your stories. Wishing you a wonderful time at the Collingwood Elvis Festival. Such a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
And keep
too.
going. We want to see your films.
Honey, oh yes.
You're still acting and you're all over the place.
I did 8 movies last year. I did 6 shorts and 2 features, and I've done 2 this year so far, and hopefully a 3rd one in the fall.
You go, girl.
Yeah. You got it.
Thank
80's
you
good.
It's only the beginning.
It's only the beginning. I'm on my 2nd bucket list.
Oh,
so
that's wonderful.
you can have more than one bucket list.
Thank you so much. I'll give you a hug.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Joining me is Elvis security and personal friend, Sam Thompson. So nice to meet you,
So
Sam.
nice to meet you too. Thank you for having me.
So you are the brother of Linda Thompson. She was Miss Tennessee in 1972 and
Yeah.
dated Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
Your sister introduced you to Elvis. So tell us about that moment when you first met Elvis.
Well, you've done your research, Yeah, you're right. Well, people, they would ask me, how did you get this gig? I mean, this is a great gig, being Elvis Presley's bodyguard. And I have this wonderful story I could weave, but the real truth is, he was dating my sister, so... I was a cop in Memphis. I was a sergeant with the Sheriff's Department. I had been Danny Thomas's bodyguard during the process of St. Jude and the golf tournaments and all. And I had been to the Secret Service Academy in Quantico and for dignitary protection. And that was my skill set, is crowd control and that type of thing, personal protection. And so when I met Elvis, I had that imprimatur of being Linda's brother, and we hit it off pretty quickly. And I suppose a lot of the repose of trust that he had was by extension of the fact that I was her brother. But then we found out pretty quickly, culturally, we knew each other before we knew each other. Memphis is not a big town, and it was smaller in the 70s. And there was a section of Memphis called North Memphis, and it was a poor area, blue-collar area. And George Klein, who was on Sirius Radio many years until he passed away, Red West, his bodyguard, Jerry Schilling, a good friend of Elvis, me, we all lived in North Memphis. Jerry Schilling and I lived on the same street, but we didn't know each other. So culturally, we ate the same food, the same restaurants, same churches, same songs, everything. So when I met Elvis, he loved cops, he loved martial arts, I was into both, and I came from where he came from. So, within moments, it was like we'd known each other forever.
That's great.
And Linda's the same way. She tells a story that she knew Elvis before she knew Elvis. So it was a pretty fast track.
And in your role as security for Elvis, you had an encounter with Jerry Lee Lewis. Can you tell us about that time?
That's a story that, it's like urban legends, things get started. But I knew Jerry Lee well, and I knew his manager. But what happened was, this is what really happened. I can sort of tell you the backstory here. Sorry, but you blasted me from the side on that. I know I was going to have to talk about Jerry Lee Lewis here. It's about Elvis. Elvis, folks. Come on.
Well, just a little bit. Just tell
Well,
us.
Jerry Lee knew Elvis, and Elvis knew Jerry Lee, and they were friends, and there was no animosity between them. Let me just clear that up right there. Jerry Lee came to Graceland one night in 1976, October, November, in the fall, and I was at Graceland that night, and Jerry Lee drove up in a Rolls Royce, and he called up to the house. And I saw him down there at the gate, so the gate guard called up, and I answered the phone. He said, Jerry Lee Lewis is here, he'd like to see Elvis. So I called upstairs, and Linda answered the phone, my sister, in the bedroom. And I told her, and so she told Elvis, and I heard Elvis say, has he been drinking? And Linda repeated that to me, and so I repeated that to the gate guard. And he says, well, I don't know. And I could hear Elvis say, well, I don't want to see him if he's been drinking. Tell him I've gone to bed. Okay. So we told him that. So he told him that. So Jerry Lee left. Well, now, I don't know what happened later that night, but I've been told that he had an accident in that Rolls Royce and had been drinking and rolled it off the road. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. Let me be the first to say that, but I did hear it. The very next night, I'm up there, and Jerry Lee drives up in a different car. And he had certainly been drinking. And so when I saw that, I went down there on a little golf cart. And of course, I always carried a weapon, you know. And the gate guard was there, and he was in a panic because Jerry Lee had pulled up and wanted to see Elvis and was inebriated. He had been gifted a commemorative pistol by the sheriff of DeSoto County in Mississippi. And in an abundance of generosity, he wanted to bring that and give it to Elvis. But he made a stop at a little honky-tonk called Hernando's Hideaway, where he got, as we say in the South, adequately oiled up. And then he went to Elvis's house to give him this pistol. Well, obviously under the influence of some liquid, his foot slipped off the brake and he had rolled into the gate and bent those music gates a little bit. And the guard was just panicked. And so by the time I got down there, he had already called the police, and the Memphis Police Department showed up and they arrested him. Now that's what happened. Now I think charges were dropped later on. But you know, Jerry Lee, his heart was in the right place. He just, like a lot of us, sometimes we have errors of judgment. You know, went under the influence, right?
Of course. So what fond memories do you have working with the King?
I have all fond memories of working with the King. But, you know, probably I get asked that question a lot, and there are specific instances that I relish. You know, he bought me a house next to Graceland. He came to the hospital when both of my children were born. You know, held both of my babies within hours of their birth.
Wow.
Did things like that. Bought my parents a house. Was really good to them. You know, there's some really good, thrilling moments. You know, playing the Omni in Atlanta, playing Pittsburgh on New Year's Eve, Detroit, Pontiac Silverdome New Year's Eve, things like that. But the thing that I cherish the most and miss the most are just those moments, and they were rare. I don't want anyone to think I was Elvis's best friend, because I wasn't. Apparently he has a lot of best friends, because they're all claiming to be that now. I used to always say if I wrote a book, it's going to be I Was Not Elvis's Best Friend by Sam Thompson. But we were good friends, and he was certainly a very good friend to me, and I tried to be that for him. But those moments when it was just me and him, when he would just sit cross-legged on his bed in his bedroom with his little blue silk pajamas on, and he didn't worry about what his hair looked like, and we were talking about religion, because he was consumed with the afterlife. He had read books by Nietzsche, philosophy. He had read everything on Paramahansa Yogananda, Eastern religion. He was really into that. And so those moments when we would just sit and talk, that I would sometimes have to, you know, mentally pinch myself and remind myself, this is Elvis Presley I'm talking to, because he became just Elvis. He became just a person, and his humanity came through more so than this iconic image that he had. I remember one time when he was a little blue, and he was telling me that, you know, he said, I'm not really sure, got all these guys working for me, are they here for the money or for me, and I'm not sure anybody really cares about me. I said, Elvis, come on, man. I mean, everybody loves you. You're an icon. He said, no, they love that guy on the stage. They don't know me. And I think that really was something that he had to struggle with. I think a lot of people struggle with that. He told me a funny story real quickly, if I may, about this religion thing. We were talking one night, and he said, we were reading a book about Paramahansa Yogananda, who was an Indian yogi who came to America and established a self-realization center in California. It's still there. It's right at the corner of Sunset and Pacific Coast Highway. And it's a meditative retreat. So we're talking about it. And he said, you know, I went there one time. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, it's really funny. It's kind of strange. Because Elvis, you know, he never dressed like this. You know, Elvis had the collar, you know, and sometimes looked like Dracula, you know, with the cape and all like that, cane. So he would, because he was Elvis, man. He could dress that way. So he goes, he said, I go, and he said there was this little monk there, and he said, I walk in, and he said I had a Star of David, a Christian cross, and an Egyptian ankh, all hanging around my neck, which is pretty much what he wore all the time. And he said the monk looked at him and said, my son, are you confused? And I started laughing at that point. I thought that was the funniest thing. He said, no, there's more. He said, I told him, no, sir, I just don't want to miss out on heaven on a technicality. And you know, the thing is that really was Elvis's philosophy. You know, he was brought up as a Southern Baptist Protestant Christian, but he was pretty open-minded on a lot of things like that. But we used to have wonderful conversations. But like I say, those little brief moments when the glimpses of him as a human being came through. And frankly, those are the things I like to talk about at these festivals, because the rest of it it's all documented.
That's right.
You know, and I can talk about the times I had to throw somebody off the stage or this or that. But the most important things to me are those memories, and I like to share those.
Were you ever an Elvis fan?
Never.
Prior to all this?
Never. I was a child of the '60s. I grew up with Four Tops and Little Anthony and the Imperials and the Temptations and all Motown stuff and Stax. And so when I met Elvis, I was the older brother. So here's a guy that's older than my sister. He's been married. He's a rock and roll star. He's going to break her heart. So I was real standoffish, and I wasn't really sure about the guy, but his charisma won me over. And you got to remember, this is 1972 in Memphis, buckle of the Bible Belt. And my mother was appalled at my sister, living in sin, moving into Graceland. Linda lived there 4.5 years in Graceland. So Elvis was able, through his charisma, to win my mother over, which is no mean feat, by the way. He had known my mother. And by extension, he won me over. So I like to say I became a fan of the person first, the human being. And then once I knew him and had some degree of confidence and trust in him, then I began to listen to his music a little bit. So eventually, I have become to appreciate him. Years later, I was a lawyer and a judge in Memphis, and I eventually was a partner in a record company with a Canadian named David Foster. And we were partnered with a group called 143 Records, joint venture with Warner Music Group. And I was the senior vice president of business and legal affairs for that group. So I signed Michael Bublé, I signed Josh Groban, and people like that. And in that period of time, I began to realize musically just what Elvis was. Because I dealt with a lot of managers and a lot of producers and of major records, but Elvis was in fact his own music producer. And I saw that time after time when he was up there on the stage. He would stop and he would say, guys, you're not in the right key. That's the wrong tempo. I mean, he would stop at that. He would do it in rehearsals. He would do it in the recording studio, and he did it in live performances. So he really was his own producer, So you develop this ear to where you hear these things. So I was fortunate to be able to do that.
That's wonderful. So why was Elvis always surrounded by his entourage? Was he insecure or because of security?
Well, I don't think he was insecure, but this is the period of time when J. Paul Getty's child was kidnapped, and they sent the ear in. Remember, Bobby Kennedy was killed in '68 by Sirhan going through a kitchen in a hotel, which is what we did all the time, to avoid the crowds. So there was a legitimate concern, and he had a little girl, Lisa Marie, and I was the principal bodyguard that carried Lisa Marie between Elvis and Priscilla. And I flew under an assumed name with a weapon on the plane to make sure that there was no kidnapping threat, because there was always something in the air. But I think I was doing an interview earlier, and I got asked a similar question. There wasn't so much of a legitimate threat as there was so many fans around Elvis that there was a real danger, and several instances where it actually occurred where he was injured inadvertently just by people who loved him so much, who wanted to touch him, be with him, get an autograph. he came out with scratches and maybe some hair pulled out of his head a couple of times. And I always had to say that if I had to put my hands on somebody during an event like that, then I had failed in my planning. So my planning was to avoid those situations, which is sort of interesting. All these years later, I'm doing these events with these ETAs and all, and these fan clubs. These were the people that I avoided when I was working for Elvis. Now, they weren't my enemy, but they were an obstacle for me. So I wasn't close to a lot of the fans back in those days because they were somebody I had to avoid. So I had all sorts of things. We would dress one of the valets up like Elvis in a jumpsuit and put him in the limo in the front, and I'd take Elvis in the alley in a police car. We did things like that to avoid the fans because I didn't want to get him hurt. So then these years later, we come around, and I have all these fans. They tell me, "Oh, I was at this show and you did this and I saw you this," and I go, "Really?"
That's amazing.
That was me.
So do you feel that Elvis felt trapped by his fame?
No. Well, it's hard. Being subjective, you never know how people genuinely feel. And I suppose he had his moments. There was one time we were sitting upstairs and he did say something along the lines of, "Well, I wish we could go out and have dinner right around Memphis like I used to." And we had an old panel truck in the back of Graceland. And I remember saying, "Well, Elvis, there's a panel truck back there, and I can put you in that truck, put a baseball cap on you, and we'll go out that back gate and nobody will ever know it's you." And he looked at me sincerely and said, "Well, what if some of my fans see me? They won't know who it is." And I looked at him and I said, "That's the point." So see, he was conflicted because as an entertainer, when your fans don't know who you are and they forget you, it's over. But as an individual, he did sort of yearn for a little bit of that freedom. But Elvis wasn't trapped. We rode motorcycles together. We took road trips, in his car. He got out, and he loved being Elvis. That's a myth. People think that he was somehow morose and depressed and sat up there in Graceland and was trapped. But the truth is, he loved being Elvis Presley.
And knowing what you know about Elvis, what do you think he would say on how he's being remembered with these Elvis festivals?
I think he'd be so gratified. I was asked earlier if I could see Elvis, if I could ask him a couple of questions, what would I say? And of course, the first thing I'd say is, "Hey man, where are you?" Because we had all these discussions about the afterlife, or is there one, and who was right, which religion got pretty close. I don't know, but I'd want to know that, and I think he'd enjoy talking about that. But seriously, I think I'd like to be the one, if he doesn't already know it at some level. I'd like to be the one to say, "Do you have any idea how popular you are 42 years after you're gone?" Because, and to me, it's the greatest legacy that remains is the one that he would want to remain, and that's his music, his body of work. And all the stories and the little anecdotes and those things, those are ancillary, really. I think what Elvis would be so happy about would be that his music and his performances are being emulated and being performed by people who have a real passion to do so. So I think he'd be grateful.
And looking back at your life, is there something you wish you could have changed?
Well, I wish I'd bought Apple stock. I think there's a lot of things that people want to change in their lives, but I think things work out the way they're supposed to. There many things that have occurred in my life that maybe you look back and say, "Well, gee, what if that door hadn't slid that way and I'd gone through a different door and I'd have done this?" But at the end of the day, I think things work out like they're supposed to. I'm a big believer in the universe having some kind of a plan for you. I think people get kind of confused. There's an old saying in the South is that man makes plans and God laughs. So we get all kind of torn up about our planning and this and that, but nothing's ever really promised to you. So I figure things work out like they're supposed to.
Well, thank you, Sam, for being my guest, and wishing you a wonderful weekend at our 25th anniversary Collingwood Elvis Festival.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your stories. We love hearing about them.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Joining me as Festivals Coordinator for the town of Collingwood, Rosemarie O'Brien. So nice to see you again.
It's always a pleasure, Diana.
this is an emotional weekend for you.
It is. It's bittersweet, and there is a lot of emotion in the room, and there's going to be even more by the end of the night. So I'm trying to brace myself.
Enjoy it.
Yes.
You deserve it.
Thank you.
So first of all, congratulations to you and your team on creating a beautiful program commemorating the 25 years of the Elvis Festival. So much time has been dedicated to this program.
There has been a lot of memories, a lot of history, and I actually really enjoyed doing the research, the history research for the program. It brought back memories and things that I thought I had forgotten. So it was really, really encouraging to do that program. So I'm really proud of it.
So you devoted 22 years out of the 25 in organizing this amazing event. Kudos on all your effort.
Oh, thank you.
And how did you get involved with the Collingwood Elvis Festival?
This is actually a bit of a unique story. At that point in time, I didn't have a job, and I was on Ontario Works, and I was working with the Chamber of Commerce. So the management team was voluntary at that time between the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce, and the management team decided they had had enough and literally left, and they needed somebody, and the two organizers that remained happened to come in while I was at the chamber, and they said, you know, we know the ground stuff, but we don't know the back end. We don't know the office stuff. We don't know the tribute artists, how to reach them. And so Sue Nicholson actually said, well, why don't you hire Rosemarie? She's on Ontario Works. And then George Zerny, who ran the Enterprise Bulletin at the time, went and said the same thing. She'd be perfect for this job. And actually, that's how I got the job. Just being in the right place at the right time.
That's amazing. So since then, you helped spearhead this festival in creating one of the biggest Elvis festival in the world. How do you feel about this milestone?
I am so proud of what we have accomplished with this event. It has been such an emotional ride, but it's been such an encouraging ride, and it just brings me joy for what it's accomplished. I knew back then that it had so much potential to be so much more. So that was what I wanted to do, is see it grow, see it develop. So I made myself a bit of a bucket list when I was hired. I wanted to see that it became an award-winning event. I wanted to see the attendance grow. I wanted to see that it became grant-worthy for the province. And lastly, I wanted to get Priscilla Presley here. So I have mastered the bucket list as this event goes. So I am extremely proud. I have an incredible team of people I work with, from the volunteers to the PRC staff to the production crews to the media. It's been such a ride. It's really great.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. It's incredible. So over the decades, you have seen it all. Any anecdotes you wish to share?
Well, you know, there's been so many stories. We were trying to remember some of them and share some of them. And Ray Gillimet touched on one when he came out. He was the very first tribute artist that I ever met when I was hired. And he came in, and I remember seeing him, and when he left, I said to my associate, oh baby, I love this job. So it ended up sticking. And then a few years later, Ray had never known that. And a few years later, we had a venue meeting, and it was held at the Bamboo Terrace in the back room. And I walked in, and usually, you know, people are talking. All of a sudden, it went silent, and I thought, what's up? And then I said, okay, well, whatever. And the next thing I know, I get a tap on the shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Ray Gillimet, and he goes, hi, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Ray, oh baby Gillimet. I went scarlet red. Your lipstick has nothing on how red I went in the face. So that has stuck.
Wow.
So now when he calls the office, he'll say, I'll just tell her it's oh baby, she'll answer.
Oh, that's such a cool thing. So over the weekend, Elvis tribute artists have been sharing how the Collingwood Elvis Festival has become a family festival. There are no other events that can compare to the connectivity that the Collingwood Elvis Festival offers to fans and tribute artists around the world. What do you have to say about that, this family togetherness?
kudos is the only word comes to mind, because that's what I wanted it to be. You can go anywhere to a festival and you can walk around and you can get tickets, but there's no personality there. There's no connection. I wanted people to feel ownership in this festival. I wanted them to want to come back because they felt that it was more like coming home to a family reunion than it was just buying tickets and coming to an event. So I think we've captured that in spades, because I can walk through and know a lot of those people by their first name, or what exact seats they want every year. So that's what we wanted to accomplish, and that's what we did.
So Collingwood has certainly been mapped globally by hosting the Elvis Festival in Collingwood. Can you elaborate about that?
Well, you know, it's funny, because the original team, I think they thought it would be a great municipal event, but I don't think they really realized the magnitude of the fan base for Elvis Presley. And I did. And I thought, you know what, this could be global. There is not a corner of the world that doesn't appreciate Elvis Presley. You may not be a massive fan, but you have to appreciate what he brought to music history and who he was. So he crossed borders and broke rules that just back in that day shouldn't have ever happened. His life was threatened, he was threatened with jail, you know, and that needs to be acknowledged. So from that standpoint alone, there were fans in Japan, there were fans in Germany, there were fans in Quebec, there was fans. So it just was something that so many people could come together with. And that's how I saw this.
And I had the pleasure of interviewing many Elvis tribute artists and had watched them progress to grand champions and some winning the ultimate Elvis tribute artist. What are your thoughts on this evolution from this event?
Well, you know, we have, like I say, a lot to be proud of. It's an interesting thing, though, that the ultimate champions that represented Collingwood are all from the UK.
I think we had this conversation in the past, yes.
Like there's something in the water over there, you know? But still, anyone was welcomed here. So it didn't matter what nationality they were or where they came from. They did a great job. They represented us well. There's Ben Portsmouth again, the UK, Gordon Hendricks. You know, it's so encouraging to see that those people had that closeness to Elvis that they could go on and win that title.
So this marks the last year the town of Collingwood is hosting this event. What do you hope the new era will bring? Because I'm seeing a lot of young people here that are wearing the Elvis t-shirts and everything, and it's really nice to see.
It is, and that's encouraging, because even though, you know, our age group is dying off, let's face facts, we need to embrace Elvis's legacy and share it with the younger demographic, a younger generation. Because I've always said, it's not that the younger people don't like Elvis, they don't know Elvis. They don't see the relevance to them. But young people are sponges. So if you introduce them and make him relevant to them, they'll embrace him too. So I've enjoyed going and talking to colleges. And when I walk in, they kind of go, oh, you know, when they hear Elvis. And I go, you know what? Stop thinking that Elvis is who your grandmother or your mother listened to. And look at what he brought to music history that you're benefiting from now. So a lot I'll refer to Bruno Mars, because Bruno Mars was an Elvis tribute artist at 8 years old. And you can Google that fact and you'll see him in his little white jumpsuit, and he's very proud of that beginning. So had Elvis not been there, you wouldn't have had a Madonna being able to sing and move like she did. You wouldn't have had, you know, 50 Cent and Usher and all of the, because he broke that barrier, or at least he led into breaking that barrier. So he deserves that accolade, and he deserves the young people to know that.
Well, thank you, Rosemarie, for your dedication, devotion, and passion over 2 decades. You certainly have set a standard for similar events around the world.
Well, thank you so much, Diana. It's always a pleasure.
Thank
you, honey.
Thank you.
And by the way, you look beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. As the curtain falls on the 25th annual Collingwood Elvis Festival, we look forward to the return of the 2020 festival, managed by a private events host, scheduled from July the 24th to the 26th. Congratulations once again to our new 2019 Grand Champion, Sylvain Leduc, and representing Collingwood, Michael Collifer. Wishing them all the best of success at the Ultimate Elvis Tribute Artist Contest held at Graceland in Memphis during the Elvis Week from August the 9th to the 17th. I would like to thank Cynthia Pepper, Marlyn Mason, Sam Thompson, and Rosemarie O'Brien for being my guests. A shout out to the Elvis Presley Enterprises for making these interviews possible. And a very special thanks to Rosemarie O'Brien for her dedication, devotion, and passion over her 2 decades with the Collingwood Elvis Festival. Thank you for watching. For more exclusive interviews with your favorite celebrities, check out Beach Talk on Wasaga Beach TV. I leave you tonight with a clip from Dean Z. Bye-bye, everyone.